BassEdge Radio. You're listening to The Edge, everything bass fishing, coming to you worldwide from Megaware KeelGuard Studios.
Aaron, welcome back. Great to get you on the line again, or maybe you got me on the line.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're sitting somewhere in a parking lot somewhere, Kurt. So
that is correct. I'm in a parking lot podcasting right here with BassEdge Radio. Dude, rocking on this May 1st episode, man. I'm excited for the show we've got to provide BassEdge Nation on this day.
Absolutely. And as always, BassEdge Radio presented by Megaware KeelGuard. First do-it-yourself keel protector, the battery guards, right? Talked to Dave not too long ago and said that the battery guards are just doing phenomenal. Flex Step, so many products that can all be found on KeelGuard.com. And of course now, Kurt, you know, I've got to say I'm a little biased on this, but certainly another SKU added to their great lineup of products, and that is the BassEdge apparel.
Yes, got my shirts in, my hat, actually sporting my hat right now. We posted a few images of those out there on the social media, and last episode we talked about doing the giveaway. We have not yet really solidified that due to some logistical things that were going on, but we will have that solidified in this month of May. So be sure you check out the BassEdge social media, the Instagram, Facebook. You'll see the apparel out there, and of course, go to the website. Also,
that's right. That's right. And you know, not making excuses, but it has been somewhat of a busy month, last 30 days, lots of events going on. You know, of course, a lot going on with the Tackle Warehouse Pro Series that you've been a part of, and a couple guests that we've had on recently doing very, very well there. And then, of course, we've got the Lake Fork. And I think your streak continues, Kurt. People that we have on continue to do well.
It does. We're going to have to get Lee Livesey on there. I mean, guy put an actual show on for the Bassmaster Elite series over there at Lake Fork. What a phenomenal day. I think it's the third largest bag in history in the Bassmaster Elite Series. He had a little over 42 pounds. Terry Scroggins has still the second largest 5 bass limit in Bassmaster history. And Dean Rojas with 45 and change still retains the largest bag in Bassmaster Elite Series history.
Well, you know it's going to be a good day, Kurt, when Lee pulls up and his first cast is, I think, right at 9 pounds. And
yes.
You know, and throwing a tennis shoe for a topwater bait. That was really neat to see how he pulled all that together.
It was really neat to see how the whole event kind of morphed as the tournament progressed. You know, really kind of started out as a sight fishing. You know, that's what a lot of the anglers were talking about in practice. But you know, kind of turned into more of a shad spawn deal. Really saw Brandon Card take advantage, had a lead after day 2 and day 3, and then Livesey just on the juice. What appeared to be for some monster bass and utilizing that top water for fish, chasing those big threadfin, gizzard shad, those types of things. So, man, big shout out to that great event. As you mentioned, Matt Becker, BassEdge interviewer before. We had him here as a featured angler on our Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. So it was great to see him get the W with kind of the early season blueback spawn. One of the few guys that was kind of on that bite. Obviously, me being there and having a tough event, we're going to dive into that here in a little bit.
Then we had Cody Huff, former BassEdge angler that we featured. He had a top 10, I think, and then Angler of the Year, right?
Cole Floyd, that's right. Yep, still retained that Angler of the Year, just slightly over Anthony Gagliardi. But yeah, man, it was a huge week, and cannot not mention the NPFL went on last week. And angler that actually won a Bassmaster Open earlier this year, and just tournament bass fishing all over the place, Aaron. It's crazy. Yeah. And we haven't even gotten to your top 5 in the BFL yet. Congratulations, my man.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we'll carve out a little bit of time for that.
We will. Well, let's do that. Let's take a quick break. Let's go into the ProtectTheHarvest.com tackle tip. Always great tips provided by past featured guests. And let's swing into that, Aaron. And then we're going to come back, talk about the top 5 BFL, maybe a few lessons learned for myself from Lake Murray. And man, we got a great show in store. Y'all stay tuned. This episode's ProtectTheHarvest.com tackle tip with MLF Big 5 Pro Circuit Angler Kyle Cortiana.
Hey guys, Kyle Cordiana here, MLF Pro Circuit Angler. Listen, this is going to be your tackle tip for May 2021. Shad spawn is something you got to be looking for right now. And I got 2 go-to baits when the shad are spawning, whether it be around docks or up around shallow bushes. If it's around docks, I'm typically going to be throwing a spinner bait. But here's the little tip. The Jawtech Punch Shad can be used as a great trailer on your spinner bait. It gives those fish a little bit different look. The Jawtech Punch Shad, it's not round like your typical swim bait. It's kind of like if you stepped on it and squashed it. So it's got a different kind of keeling system and makes the bait wiggle a little bit different. And so if you're going to throw a spinner bait around them docks, tip it with that. If all of a sudden you want to get shallow in them bushes or even throw it around the docks too with a buzz bait, the Jawtech Punch Shad is not as soft of a plastic as your standard boot tail swim baits. It was literally designed to punch through mats. So if you tip that on your buzzbait and you're throwing around a bunch of bushes, trust in the fact it will not tear. It won't slide down your bait. You will make several more casts because you have that punch set on as a trailer as opposed to a softer plastic bait. And you'll be able to just rip it through them bushes and just keep casting.
Awesome tip, Kyle. Brought to you by ProtectTheHarvest.com.
First by land and now by sea. For years, Lucas Oil has been a staple in high-performance vehicles on both the road and track. Now, from the makers of Lucas Oil comes Lucas Marine products, specifically engineered for marine applications. Protect and lubricate your marine inboard, outboard, or high-performance boat with Lucas Marine Engine Oil or Lucas Synthetic-Based Oil. Learn more about the complete line of Lucas Oil and marine products. Visit lucasoil.com.
Nitro Performance Bass Boats. Get pro-level performance with the Nitro Z18, the official boat of Major League Fishing. The Z18, with its nimble handling and versatility, sports many of the features in the larger boats in the line, like a Guardian Live Well, a heavily insulated cooler, dual 8-foot rod storage, and our smooth and fast NVT hull. Every Nitro boat is laid out to do one thing very well: catch fish. Enormous front decks, up to 45 square feet on the Z21, allow maximum mobility when battling unruly bass, and feature low-profile gunnels for ease of skipping, pitching, flipping, or landing fish. Nitro Performance Bass Boats, pure fishing machines.
Aaron, we talked in that opening episode about all the fishing going on here over the last week and a half or 2 weeks, and nonetheless, no better way to express the BassEdge Nation but based on our personal experience, and mentioned your top 5 at the BFL on Table Rock Lake. And I gotta hear the deets, brother. Let us know kind of what the pattern was, how things boiled down for you, and what was working on Table Rock there a couple weeks ago at the Bass Fishing League event where you solidified the Aaron Martin BassEdge edge.
Oh, yeah. So to kind of set the stage, I mean, it's no secret for long-term listeners that people know that if I have a chance to get in the check line, it's generally going to be in the spring on Table Rock. But, Kurt, we just came off the first full moon right there, the latter part of March, first part of April, so kind of in between. It was definitely setting up to where it could be a sight fishing tournament, right, which, there was definitely a lot of guys that were catching off of beds. I am not as proficient at that, even though I like to do it. So, my approach has always been, I believe, I'm going for pre-spawn fish that are staging, hanging out, Table Rock specifically on trees. And so had a decent practice. I was able to hook up with a big fish each day, kind of staying and just running a pattern of trees. And what I found was, Kurt, that a lot of the bait was holding kind of in that 21 to 22 feet range, meaning that was the depth of the water. It doesn't mean that the bait was all the way on the bottom. So most of the trees that I was actually fishing, the better trees were producing. I could not see the tops of them. So I could catch some out of the cedar trees that you could actually see sticking up. But I predominantly just focused on that. Did focus around points. That was a big thing of secondary points that were leading into those spawning pockets, because I was believing that the fish were coming in, the bigger fish would come in, check, feed, whatever, and then go right back out until the conditions were right. So bait of choice was a swim bait. And I kind of toggled back and forth between a 3.8, 4.8 Kitech, then also threw a fluke a little bit, if you can believe that. And
Nice.
really, we've talked about it so many times. I'm almost kind of sick of mentioning it, but I've got to say that forward-facing sonar, I used the Garmin. And normally, Kurt, I would have to go up right. Table Rock is a flood control lake. So those trees, when they are submerged like that, there's only kind of one way to know back in the day of how much water was actually over the trees, specific trees that I was fishing. And that was to actually get close or use, side imaging. Well, now because of the real-time forward-facing sonar, I was able to shoot those and I could tell how much water depth was on them, see if there was any bait, see if there was any fish. And this was the first tournament that I personally really capitalized on that because I could see my bait coming through the trees. I could see the fish react to those. But so I had 4 fish fairly early, and then at 12:40 on Sunday decided to make about a 40-mile run through some pretty rough conditions. We had a pretty serious north wind coming in, and went up to another group and was able to not only finish out my limit but cull a few times. Most of my fish were making very, very long casts, so I had a lot of line out. The one fish I did lose, which would have helped me a little bit, was one that I'd caught deeper, kind of closer to the boat, put a little too much pressure on her, and she jumped right in front of the boat, right in front of my trolling motor, came straight up like somebody shot her out of a cannon and threw the bait. So anyway, long story short, just a fantastic, fun tournament. Had just a blast. Had a mixed bag, 2 largemouth, 2 smallmouth, and a spotted bass, and everything on Table Rock has to be 15 inches. So nothing too over the top, just kind of simple. Just put a little chartreuse on the tail of the swim bait, and that seemed to work very well.
Well, the deal right there, right out of the top, Aaron, going with what you've got confidence in, not worrying about what other anglers are doing or how they're attacking, or maybe even, that dock talk to get in your head, and you went and did what your strength was. I've got a quick question about your pattern. Did you find that those fish were relating to the bottom, like the base of those cedar trees? Are they suspended? And how did you decide how to fish that? What was productive for you in that pre-spawn bite?
Yeah, so I firmly believe that just by looking on my graph that most of my fish were not on the bottom. However, I do believe they were coming up because they were knocking. When they would hit, I wouldn't get a lot of bites, but when they would literally, especially the smallmouth and the spots, they would knock 2-3 foot of slack in your line. It was just an explosive bite. And the other thing is, too, this is something that, when I lived on Table Rock, I worked on this for 2 to 3 years just trying to figure out. That was back in our BassEdge TV taping days, and being
6, 7, 8,
that's right. Yep. And trying to figure out, okay, how can I bring a swim bait to the White River impoundments? Just being able to live down there, going out with one rod, and just saying, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. But back to your original question, the bait was, like I said, it was kind of in that middle water column, in that 21, 22 foot range, I would say. But my last fish that I caught later in the day, actually, that one that I just described that I'd lost, my boat was setting in 46 feet of water, and those trees topped out about 15 feet below the water surface, and I was just basically, catching them suspended in those tops of those trees. One I did catch, Kurt, that I ended up culling, was a post-spawn. She had already spawned out, and it was a spotted bass. So, those are areas that they come right back to as pre-spawn.
Coming and going.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was similar, I think, to what Matt Becker did really well there at Lake Murray. He had these fish, kind of dialed in on these long extended points there at Lake Murray, and he had pre-spawners and post-spawners both utilizing, although there was some of the blueback spawn going on as well. But I think more it was that transition zone where he would have fish going into pockets and moving out of pockets through that pre-spawn and post-spawn transition. So totally different impoundments, but some similarities there in that style of pattern.
Yeah.
Whereas, a guy doesn't need to go, or an angler doesn't need to go sight fish, or if that's not their strength, there's something out there that they can figure out that leans to their strengths and confidence to be successful. So that's a great story, man. I appreciate it, dude. Again, congratulations. You had 200 plus anglers out there, and then you got 200 plus co-anglers out there. Dude, congratulations. Great finish.
Thank you.
It was awesome to see the this stuff on social media, and that big smile, because I know that Aaron Martin works hard at what he does, whether it's on the water or off the water. And when you see the benefits being reaped, it's a lot of fun to watch. So
very rewarding. And, you have a story to share with us as well, Kurt, and concerning Lake Murray. And I think, in our pre-discussion leading up to the interview, you had mentioned lessons learned. And I think that's a good topic to kind of run with. And I would like to hear kind of your thoughts and your experience.
Yeah, quickly, Lake Murray, I was excited to go to sight fish. That's really what I wanted to do. It's something that I have fun doing, and I've had some really decent tournament success in full-fledged sight fishing events. And with the later spring and everything that had been going on, I really felt like that was going to lean to me. So perfect game plan was to focus on sight fishing down lake, where some of those later spawners would be coming up, because down lake, deeper water, specifically on Murray clear water, takes a little bit more time to warm in the spring. So I'm figuring that's where, those fish are going to spawn the last. And, in my 2 days of practice, I concentrated one practice day down lake, started seeing some betters and looking, and got a few of them to bite and shake them off, and feeling decent about it, through 11, 12 o'clock that day, and then really just stopped seeing them down there. So I had maybe 8 or 10 fish marked, and then just kind of stopped seeing what was happening, in my predetermined pattern, hopeful, that I'm looking for down there. And anyway, second day of practice, I fished mid-lake, really start seeing a lot more bedding activity mid-lake, which kind of surprised me, because again, my thought process was that those fish would be coming up later on the lower half of the lake. And long story short, the ticket in this tournament was to fish mid-lake and up the river for fish that had already completed most of the spawn process, or, as I mentioned, Matt Becker, catching some fish going in and out, where there was a few fish still left to spawn in that mid-lake area. And I don't really know, Aaron. Sometimes you just can't put your finger on it, why that down lake thought process just wasn't working for me. It could have been we were between moons. There was a couple of those fish that had left during the tournament that I didn't find. A few fish, and I hate admitting this, but there was 2 or 3 fish I just flat out couldn't get them to bite, and that happens sometimes
Sure.
in bed. But overall, man, it was a tough, disappointing event for me. And this is how wild tournament bass fishing is. I've had 6 days of competitive fishing this year: 2 at Okeechobee, 2 at Smith Lake, and 2 at Lake Murray. And I've had 3 fair days, decent tournament days as far as weight in comparison to the field. And then I've had 3 poor days in weight as comparison to the field. And so I am down in the standings right now. So I'm excited to get to Lake Eufaula, put that stuff behind me. We're going to be there in about a week and a half. I'll be leaving on the 8th of May. So I got basically a week and a day or two to get ready. And then, that event's going to be here before I know it. So I'm looking forward to it, to get off the schneid and turn this thing back around. But Lake Murray, definitely a lot of lessons learned. And that's all we can do is put those in the memory bank and push forward to excel at the next event. So
Absolutely.
All right, Aaron, look, we are, again, got a great guest, a returning guest, a new Elite Series champion. We're going to talk to this angler coming up just in a half a second. We're going to get him on the line in our Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Bradley Hallman here with Aaron and Kurt.
This is Elite Series Pro Greg DePalma.
This is MLF BPT Pro Angler Justin Lucas.
This is Ron Nelson, FLW Pro.
This is BPT MLF Pro Brian Thrift.
This is Elite Series Pro Buddy Gross. BassEdge will return in just a moment.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat? Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
Aaron, as I mentioned in the earlier segment, we are rolling with another great Lucas Oil featured angler in this episode. longtime veteran of the BASS Elite Series, been on the show before, so I'm throwing out some little tidbits right here. Recently crowned Elite Series champion. Look forward to catching up on his post-spawn tactics, how he works pattern progression to catch fish, and maybe bass fishing's toughest seasonal behavior cycle. Welcome back to the show, BASS Elite Series Pro, Bill Lowen. Appreciate you coming back, Bill.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
That was a hell of an intro, right? You like that?
Oh, amazing, man. You get better and better.
After 351 episodes, we better be dang good, right?
Right? You better be. You better be doing something right.
That's right. Well, Bill, as Kurt mentioned, always great to be hanging with you, and I know you're coming off of a Lake Fork, maybe not what you would quite put up there as where you would like to finish. I'd like for you to talk on that briefly, but more importantly, huge congrats on just knocking down that Elite Series win on Lake Pickwick back in March. You know, it was awesome to kind of see you in the winner's circle, and I especially, you know, appreciated those were some great shots of your family celebrating that win with you. And, you know, kind of curious to know what the aftermath has been like, and also curious if your wife Jennifer is screaming louder now, you know, when you hit the weigh-in stage.
She's screaming louder at me now because she said I better catch them at every event now. You know, but you know what, that was
different. Let's just quantify that, right? Bill Lowen.
No, you know what?
Every event, almost every. That's why they call it the Dollar Bill Lowen, right?
Yeah, there you go. It was truly an amazing week. You know, I mean, they always say when you're going to win, you can't do nothing wrong, and it was definitely a week of that. You know, it was truly a scenario of fishing in your comfort zone and fishing the way you love to fish. And when you do that, you fish freely and you fish the best that you're going to be on the water. And that's just what happened, you know. And since then, I knew it'd be crazy if whenever we won an event. But, man, I had no idea that, how do I say this, the responsibilities that come with that. You know, it truly opened my eyes to how many true fans I had watching me and supporters and things like that, and just I was overwhelmed with that. And then, you know, the sponsorship stuff and the media stuff that come with that. It was a nonstop week and a half from the time you got up till the time you went to bed. It was basic media stuff. And look, I'm not complaining. I'd love to do it all over again, but I truly had no idea that it was going to be as crazy as it was. But like I said, I'll take it again whenever they want to give it to me.
That's so cool, man. Like Aaron mentioned, it was great to see those shots of the family up there on stage. They've been with you through everything. Every time I've seen you on the road, every time I talk to you, you know, it seems like you guys are always together. And seeing those shots, as Aaron mentioned, on stage, it was fun to watch. So congratulations.
Well, I think everybody forgets. I don't want to say they forget, but your family or your support crew that's behind the scenes, being your family, is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. And if you don't have that behind you, man, it's hard to focus on what you have to do out there on the water. I'm just going to say, if you got squirrels running around in your head, it's hard to concentrate out there on the water, you know. And like you said, Jennifer and the kids have been with me from day one. The kids know nothing different. You know, Fisher was on the airplane at 2 weeks old flying to the Bassmaster Classic. I mean, they know that this is their lifestyle. Everything we do revolves around the outdoors. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, if they weren't with me on the road, I don't know if I could do it, because I sure wouldn't want to get that phone call of, hey, when you coming home, Dad? You know, and for them to be here with me all the time, and regardless if Dad catches them or not, when I hit the dock, they don't really care. You know what I mean? All they know is that Dad's home and life is good. So like I said, I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, because my wife, Jennifer, she does things behind the scenes that I just couldn't handle it all. And, you know, she homeschools the kids, and there's just an endless list of things that she does. And I don't think that the bass wives get enough credit, for sure.
Yeah. So happy you mentioned that. And that's why, you know, we mentioned how awesome it was to see the family shot up there, and how they were just as elated as the winner. That, you know, they won.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So
it's a win. It's a win. It's a win for everybody.
That's right. It's great to see. Well, Bill, we're going to dive into some seasonal behavior pattern topics of post-spawn bass, man. A lot of people struggle through the time of year when, maybe there's a few late spawners, but most everything is post-spawn. Where do the fish go? What are they doing? The last time you were on the show, we talked about your shallow water expertise. So let's talk about that some more, but specifically with some of these post-spawn scenarios that anglers encounter throughout, kind of May and even into June, the farther you get up north, that May, June timeframe before things really start to pop. We saw some of that at Lake Fork where, there were some anglers that got on some of that post-spawn bite and some of those fish feeding up after the spawn, but still a lot of spawners on the bank. But it gets tougher as it goes on. What kind of cover are you looking for in shallow water to get the bites during the post-spawn cycle?
All right. Well, like you said, I'm predominantly known as that shallow water guy, and I'm going to stay shallow as long as I can. If I don't have to ever go offshore, I'd be fine with that. And I think a lot of people think that as soon as the spawn's done, just because we've always pounded this in the angler's head, is that every fish in the lake goes offshore, and that's where they spend the rest of the year. But as you know, I've made a career out of staying shallow in the mud all year long from start to finish. And, what I'm looking for right after the spawn, and I'm just kind of truly going to talk when there's no more fish spawning, because, because
sure,
we don't want to kind of get wrapped up in all that. So what I'm looking for, what I'm considering the post spawn, is I'm looking for what's going to keep those big fish up there, because we need big female bites. We need to try to catch those fish, and there's two things in me at this time of the year, or that time of the year, that's going to keep those fish up there. And that's going to be the shad spawn and the brim spawn, or the bluegill spawn. Those are going to be your two biggest things that keep those fish up there. Them shad are going to spawn early in the morning, low light conditions. So this isn't something that lasts typically all day. It'll last a little longer when we get some cloud cover or maybe some rain, but typically it's an early morning deal, and you're going to be looking at docks and marinas, things like that, floating marinas, rocks and seawalls. Them shad really like hard surfaces to spawn on. And when there's thousands and thousands of shad up there, there's going to be a lot of big bass around them typically. Post-spawn fish to me want an easy meal because they've exerted so much energy to be up there spawning all spring. So when there's thousands of shad up there, man, that's like going to the shad buffet. Right. And it's an easy meal for them. The other thing that I look for is that bluegill spawn or that brim spawn, because when them bluegill are up there spawning and making beds and making babies, them big females just cruise around on them and once again suck up an easy meal. So those are the two big factors that play for me, in that post-spawn funk. The next thing I'm going to be looking for is out in front of that spawning pocket. Typically our spawning areas are shallow flats and things like that. And I'll try to find whatever piece of cover is what I'm going to say on that first initial drop. From the spawning flat, it may be a foot or two up there out to 3 or 4 foot if there's a old stump row or maybe an old bridge abutment or a big lay down tree. Any kind of structure that's out there on that first drop. That's why that time of the year flipping docks and fishing docks is so well, because that's that first piece of structure that's close to deep water that them fish will set up on. So if you kind of can remember those three things, and that post-spawn funk is sure, without a doubt, going to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah. Aaron, real quick, before we go on to another question, let me fire this back at Bill. You talk about the shad spawn, some great tips on where you can find that shad spawn. How often do you find shad spawning and there's no bass around them? And
a lot.
Differently.
Well,
to find feeding fish that are taking advantage of that shad spawn scenario.
Well, the thing you got to remember is, regardless of what pattern you're fishing, it's no different than when you're flipping trees or docks or cranking rock for whatever reason. There's always those areas that are better than others. And how many times have you fished 100 points on a lake, but only 1 point's got fish on it? If we could ever figure out and break that code of what makes this spot better than another, we'd be way ahead of the game. So it's just basically a situation of trying to run as many areas and trying to get a bite. Listening, I always say that every bite's a piece of the puzzle. And just because the shad are up there spawning does not mean there's going to be bass up there on the points with them. So the whole deal there is just you got to try to figure out as many areas as you can. And typically, if you find an area on the shad spawn that they're on, they're going to be there till the shad are done spawning.
Good stuff. Bill, I think for me personally, the springtime, the spawn, right, is a very interesting time of year because you have a lot of different fish species coming into the bank, and you get to see behavior, perhaps, if the water's clear enough, of how fish are reacting and doing things. But, that's such a limited window. And now, since we're kind of talking about post-spawn, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. once that, bass kind of leave the nest. And in your opinion, kind of what's the difference of how the male and the female bass react? Because you brought up something in your earlier answer there that, we all need those female bites, right? Because that's the size for us that are in the tournament realm. But even for the weekend angler, somebody that's just out here wanting to try and catch a good quality fish, do you believe are there differences in how the males act versus the females and where they go and what you're using to target them?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that, like I said, I believe that female bass needs to, how do I say this, kind of recuperate faster than maybe the male bass does. So she's going to go right to what I'm just going to consider those buffets, them easy meals. I'll just use this for an example. Like if you find a really good brim bed and you just put your poles down, put your raptors down, and just sit there and watch that bluegill bed, you'll see them big female bass just kind of cruising in there, you know what I mean? And they're just looking for that easy meal. So I think, to me, what I always feel is that big female, she sits where she's going to get an easy meal, where she's not going to exert a lot of energy to make that happen. And the shad spawn and the brim spawn are, to me, the two best things for that to happen. Now, with that being said, that male bass, to me, his job quite isn't done yet. He's kind of got to stay up there and guard fry and make sure that Big Mama's hatch is going to make it through the year. You know what I mean? So, he's got a job like he's the bulldog. He's got to stay up there and fight off the brim and maybe even the other little bass that want to eat the fry. We spend a tremendous amount of time that time of the year fishing fry garters, so them, to me, before that male gets done and he gets to get out there and play around the shad spawn and the brim spawn, what's left of it. Like I said, his job isn't quite done yet. So to me, that's the kind of the scenarios that I look for, kind of what I think. Bass fishermen think they know everything, and we really truly don't know anything. You know what I mean? Because they prove us wrong all the time. But to me, that's kind of the way I look at it, and the way that I feel that them big females do before they actually make that move offshore, if they ever do. I believe there's truly a fish that stays shallow its whole life and doesn't even know there's a main lake out there. So those are the fish I'm typically always looking for.
Well, sounds to me like we got this dialed in to your, thought process with the bluegill spawn, the shad spawn. How about lures to target those bass? So when you're targeting the shad spawn, give us 2 or 3 lures that, are productive for Bill Lowen in those situations. And when you're targeting those bluegill beds, what are 2 or 3 lures that are productive for you in those scenarios?
Really, there's truly only a handful of baits you need for that shad spawn. Everybody that knows me knows I'm a swim jig freak. I typically will go with one of my signature series swim jigs from Lure Parts Online, typically in a white or something in that shad color. I really, at that time of the year, I like swim bait trailers that imitate shad. Optimum Double Diamond is an amazing swim jig trailer to get you that shad profile. If I really, really want to slow that jig down a lot, I'll go to something that's got flapping legs on it, like a Strike King Rage Crawl. And typically for me, it's always in that white pattern, that shad pattern. Top waters can be really good. IMA makes 2 top waters to me that are the best top waters in the industry, and that's the Little Stick and the Grande Skimmer. And the Grande Skimmer is probably my favorite top water bait. It's just a bigger dog walking style bait. But if you were to take a swim jig and a top water and run that shad spawn, I don't think you could go wrong. You could always mix in a crankbait or a spinnerbait or something like that. But if you run a swim jig and a top water, 2 baits that allow you to cover a lot of water, there's no way you could go wrong with it at all. And then when we start talking about the bluegill spawn, once again, I'm going to throw a swim jig. Once again, I'm going to use the same trailers. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my color of my swim jig to maybe something in a bluegill pattern or black and blue. There's a endless array of bluegill colors. When you catch a bluegill and put him in your hand, he's got purples and greens and oranges and yellows.
Right.
So you can't truly ever just say this exactly. You can't truly say this is the color. So I always bounce back and forth between bluegill and black and blue. And then, another one of my favorite baits is a frog. The Optimum popping furbit frog, to me, is the easiest frog you can use to walk the dog with. So I wouldn't never count out using a frog, because a lot of times them bluegill are spawning way back under willow trees or way back in places where you just don't want to throw a treble hooked bait or something like that. So for me, it's pretty simple. For the shad spawn and the bluegill spawn. And you could throw endless things. You could throw Cincos or stick worms or around there, finesse worms and things like that. But man, if I can power fish and not have to get a spinning rod out or something like that, man, I'm just gonna I'm going to power fish if it ain't working, but once again, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to get a bite. But those would be my top choices in trying to figure out how to get a bite around the shad spawn and the bluegill spawn.
Awesome. Phenomenal choices. I like that Optimum frog as well. It's got a little bit bigger profile than a lot of other frogs. So
it does. And like I said, it walks so well that you can almost walk it right in place.
Yep. All right. Great stuff. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to return after a quick message from our partners. We'll continue this post-spawn bass discussion with Bill Lowen. Aaron, hit those power pole buttons down. We'll be back in a moment.
Patented in 2000, perfected over years of testing and real-world punishment, the Power Pole is the ultimate shallow water boat positioning tool. Swift, Power Pole deploys in seconds from anywhere in your boat. Virtually silent, Power Pole won't spook wary fish. Secure in strong currents or gusting winds in up to 8 feet of water. Engineered to take it with a lifetime unconditional replacement guarantee on the spike. Power Pole, swift, silent, secure. Visit powerpole.com to find a dealer near you.
BassEdge Radio, presented in part by Mercury Marine, returns with BASS Elite Series champion Bill Lowen in the Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. That's right, Lucas Oil high-performance marine products. For oil that surpasses all manufacturers' requirements, be sure to visit the BassEdge.com store for free shipping on all Lucas products. It works.
Bill, before the break, discussing, catching female post-spawn bass. Let's get into some of this male bass category. Everybody needs some limit fillers. We all want to catch 5 and 8 pounders. Doesn't happen all the time, unfortunately. But really want to pick your brain on some fry garters. I was recently at an event over at Lake Murray. A lot of fry garters over there, and you could catch a few. Some were tough to catch. I want to get your opinion. Do you feel that, the male bass that are guarding fry in this post-spawn seasonal behavior pattern, is that a viable pattern? And how do you like to target a fry garter once you identify them?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a viable pattern because, heck, man, let's face it, sometimes there's 3 and 4 pound males that are guarding fry. You know what I mean? And to me, that's a fish that's going to play. I don't care where you're at in the country, typically.
That's right.
And once again, my bait choices are pretty simple when it comes to that. When I look at fry garters, I want to select a bait that I can keep in front of that fish, typically as long as possible. And with that being said, once again, I'm going to have a swim jig rigged up, typically in that bluegill pattern, because that's what's typically, going to be screwing with the fry. It's typically not going to be a shad or something like that. But there are days when white tends to work well. But I want a swim jig that I can slow way down. And typically when I say slow it way down, I want to go with a 1/4 ounce jig. I want to go with a big flappy trailer like that, like I said, like that Strike King Rage Pro. I want to keep it there in front of their face as long as I can. My next choice would be probably some type of a popper, depending on what kind of cover I'm around. The I'm a Finesse popper would be an amazing choice for that in our bluegill color. And once again, a frog. Typically those fry garters are going to always be around some kind of grass, tree, some kind of structure where they can hide in the shadows. And because that fry wants to be out in the sun, that fry needs the sun to stay warm and survive. And but you're typically not going to see that fry guarding bass sitting out there in the sun. So he's going to be hiding back, lurking in the shadows, keeping an eye on the kids. So if you can get a bait that you can keep in that strike zone for a long time and almost aggravate him into biting, those would be some really good choices, 3 really good choices, the swim jig, the popper, and the frog. And if that doesn't typically work for me, then I will go with some type of wacky rig finesse worm, whether that be a 4-inch Strike King finesse worm or a 7-inch finesse worm, whatever that may be. And I typically will rig that wacky with as little weight as possible. I want that bait to fall slow, stay around that fry as long as it possibly can. So for me, those would be my 4 choices. If those aren't working, then I'm probably going to go do something else.
How long will you stay? I mean, fry guarding, catching fry guarding bass, cat and mouse game to say the least. Well, I'll say it's not totally different from catching a spawning fish, right? I mean, there's something
I agree 100%.
Is dialed into, and that they're trying to do in life, whether it's spawn or, as in this case, we're talking about garden fry, how long will you stay on a quality bass that you're trying to catch as a fry guarder? Like you say, 3-4 pounder. I mean, most places we go, if you can stack the box with 3 and 4 pounders, you're probably going to be doing pretty good. So how
absolutely.
Will you hang on a fry garder, and how much time will you put into a fish like that?
I'm glad you brought that up about the spawning fish, because I'm gonna fish these fry garters just like I'm bed fishing. I'm gonna put that trolling motor down, and I'm gonna start running the banks. I'm gonna start running the banks with a swim jig or a popper or a frog or whatever that is to cover water. Okay, and you're gonna catch those fish that you don't even know are guarding fry because you've just thrown your bait by the fry and this fish is reacting to it. So I'm gonna be cruising along like that, always visually looking for the fry garters or for that ball of fry. It'd be no different than cruising down the bank fishing and looking for spawning bass. Okay. So once you see that ball of fry, or maybe you see that fish that's guarding the fry and you put your poles down, you start working on that fish, it's going to be no different than bed fishing. I mean, there's bed fish that you can't catch, and know that pretty fast because of the way it's reacting, and fry garters are no different. When you start working on that fish, you can tell if it's running off or if it's even interested. You can pretty much tell pretty quickly if you're going to get that fish to react or not. So I would really, really compare it to bed fishing in that just kind of decide how that fish is reacting to your bait. Is its fins moving? Is it changing colors? Is it seem like it's an aggressive fish? And like I said, it's kind of no different than, like you mentioned, bed fishing. Those fish will react, and there's times when you say, man, there's no way I'm possibly going to be able to catch this fish. And I believe fry garters are the same way. So, man, if I don't think she's going to play or bite, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on her, because there's a pretty good chance that somewhere down the line there's going to be another one.
Hey, Bill, you brought up topwater a few different times. Obviously, no secret that it's a huge success in your arsenal and for most of us in the springtime. One question that I do have on the 3 styles, like the frog, the chugging or popping style bait, and then kind of the walk the dog style bait. Any bait modifications that you would throw out to BassEdge Nation that have kind of you've kind of found that make a big difference, or you just kind of a straight out of the box kind of guy?
I've always kind of been that meat and potatoes guy when it comes to the actual bait itself, unless we start talking about jigs and swim jigs, because I'm like anal about that stuff. But I always like to be that guy that you can catch them on what comes right out of the box. You know what I mean? Because when you start modifying things and doing things, you may not be able to get your hands on that exact same thing if you lose it. You know what I mean? And then we all know that bass fishing is about 100% what's going on in your head. And boy, when you lose a bait that's been modified, or you just can't get another one, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to catch a bass again the rest of my life. So one of the modification that I'm going to make to my hard baits, my top waters, without a doubt, is changing the hooks out with Hayabusa treble hooks. We have the Hayabusa treble hooks that, are your standard black nickel like everybody else in the industry. But we also have a treble hook that has an NRB coating on it. And to me, it's the easiest treble hook to penetrate into a fish's mouth. That coating is so slick that it's so easy to get hooked up. So one tip I'm going to give you, that I don't care what kind of treble hooks your bait comes with on. Typically the ones that they come with are not good. You can catch fish on them, but day in and day out when the money's on the line, if you can get your hands on some Hayabusa treble hooks with that NRB coating, I'd put them on everything. If you wanted to not buy a security system for your house and just put them treble hooks all around your house, you'd never have to worry about any thieves getting in.
Oh my God, that's classic. I love that. Okay, that's quote of the year right there so far. Nice one, Bill. I love that. Security system with treble hooks. All right, real quickly, we know you love shallow water. We know you're not leaving. If you're sniffing fish, you're probably not leaving. Catching, it's okay. If you're sniffing them, you're probably still shallow. But post-spawn, just not seeing the shad spawn, maybe the bluegill beds aren't quite showing up, maybe tween moons, whatever the scenario is. If you had to move offshore, what are you looking for to be successful in that post-spawn scenario?
Well, what do we consider an offshore? Is that 1 cast away, 2 cast away?
In this particular interview, I want to know what Bill Lowen considers offshore.
Okay, so here's the deal. If you're running down the lake, okay, and you see me sitting out there in the middle, please stop, because I'm probably broke down or out of gas. All right. Look, I don't have any problem going out there and fishing deep when I know that there's no possible way that I'm going to catch one fishing my style. You know what I mean? If we're on a Tennessee River Lake, Kentucky Lake, Pickwick, and you have to be out there, I'm going to be out there. But with that being said, I'm going to go back to concentrating on what we talked about. If that shad spawn's not working, that bluegill spawn's not working, I'm going to concentrate on that first cover, on that, what I'm considering that first drop. You know what I mean? That may be 100 yards from the bank. That may be 10 yards from the bank, you know, and whether that be a stump or a drop off or a big lay down tree sitting on a flat or a row of docks that's maybe sitting on a channel swing or something like that. Them are the things that I'm going to look for. Them are the things where I feel when those things aren't going on, that's where those bass gravitate to. And that's just one of them places where they can get out there, they can sit, they can recoup. And like you said, if we're between a moon, if we're between a spawn that's going on, they're just sitting there waiting because they know that the shad are going to come back and spawn, the bluegill are going to come up and spawn. And it's just kind of a cat and mouse game for them until they get recuperated. So to me, I always feel like those fish, whether it be a buck or a female, go set up on that first piece of, well, I guess for me, it would be considered offshore cover.
Right.
And I don't care what it is. Like I said, I don't care if it's a rock, a dock, a daggone sunken car, a refrigerator, whatever's in the water closest to that drop out in front of that spawning pocket. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And like I said, that may be 100 yards offshore, that may be 10 yards, but whatever that piece of cover is, that's kind of what I'm going to be focusing on.
Great stuff. All right, Bill, man, that's very enlightening. Enjoyed that post-spawn conversation. We got a listener question segment, obviously always brought to us by Nitro Performance Bass Boats. This episode's question was sent in by Tom Bryan from the St. Louis, Missouri area. Tom asks this: when fishing smaller Midwest rivers with a canoe or kayak, if you are limited to the number of rods you can fit, which of course in a canoe or kayak you are, in the summer, you've got 3 rods, 3 lures in a canoe or kayak, fish a 10-mile stretch of river, what 3 are you choosing?
You know, that's a kind of pretty good question for me because I grew up not necessarily kayak or canoe fishing, but wading little streams and little tiny rivers like that, fishing for smallmouth and spotted bass and things like that. So I kind of know exactly what he's talking about, which is kind of cool. So for me, it was always a spinning rod. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times you're in little close quarters, overhanging trees, places that maybe you don't want to be trying to sling a bait caster around. So if it was my choice, man, I'd have 3 spinning rods with me, you know, maybe a 7-foot medium heavyish action, you know, 6-8 pound line. And my bait choices, once again, man, y'all know I'm as simple as it gets. I'm going to have a popping style bait. You know, like I said, that I'm a finesse popper would be amazing. It's a smaller profile popper, would be perfect for that situation. I really, truly like a small finesse buzzbait of some sort. Once again, something you can cover a lot of water with, and on those little rivers and streams like that, that's a bait that a lot of those people that are in canoes and kayaks just typically don't fish with. And then my other choice is going to be something that I could fish on the bottom. Typically, once again, small, maybe a 3-inch Strike King rodent or some little type of swim bait, just something that I could fish down closer to the bottom in those little current type areas. So for me, it'd be those 3 choices. 3 rods would be 3 spinning rods. 3 loose spinning rods, you know what I mean? Something that you could just throw around in the boat, not necessarily have to worry about destroying it, and go have fun, man. I mean, I think so many times us as anglers, we miss that type of fishing, you know, where we're just going and having fun because spend so much time out here on the road and everything's always so seriously that when you get a chance to get an opportunity to do something like that, I think us as anglers need to take full advantage of it.
Great answer there, Bill. And, you know, being a quite familiar with some of the rivers that Tom is referring to, whether it's the Merrimack, you know, the Gasconade River, the Burbus, I think you hit the nail on the head. I would also probably just add maybe just a finesse jig, like a jewel finesse jig or something like that as well. But I so agree. I think all of us have talked about how we grew up and kind of targeting, you know, whatever would bite the end of our line, whether it's a farm pond, a stream. And sometimes it can be very, very rewarding just putting together, you know, one just small tackle box with limited amounts of tackle and rod and reel choices and limited mobility. And those are some of the best memories of my life in the sport of bass fishing. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So anyway,
for me, I like the way that Bill talked about the spinning reels because I'm probably going to dump my kayak And I need to make sure I'm not tearing up any bait caster equipment. So that was the most important tip there for me, because I know I'm getting wet and all my gear is probably going to get wet.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Kurt. If you're getting in a kayak, it's probably going to get flipped over. And, man, I don't want to have my high-end stuff out there with me. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I definitely have my boat gear and my kayak gear for sure.
That's all good stuff, guys. Well, Bill, certainly appreciate you answering that question for Tom. Tom, we do need one more thing from you, and that is to please log on to BassEdge.com, click the Claim Your Prize tab, fill out the information, and we will get a Bass Edge gift sent directly to you.
And as always, Bass Edge Nation, keep firing in those questions, man. We've got a lot of great ones. We haven't gotten to all of them all the time, but we are picking some top-notch questions that y'all are sending in. Keep sending those through our email, support@bassedge.com, or leave us the comments on the Facebook and Instagram media pages.
Well, Bill, it has absolutely been a blast catching up with you, and just what an education on post-spawn, right? It's a difficult thing to do, of catching sometimes post-spawn bass, but certainly I think you broke it down in a way that makes absolute sense, and certainly going to put more fish in the boat for all of Bass Edge Nation. Congratulations again on that Elite Series win. Any closing thoughts or final remarks before we shut this episode down?
You know, I just think if I had to leave the listeners with anything, it's that, you know, stick to your guns, fish in your comfort zone, fish your style. You know what I mean? I think when you do that, you're going to fish, like I said before, the best of your abilities. And when you try to do things that maybe you're not so good at, or get out of your comfort zone, when things go wrong, you don't have no idea how to get out of them. You know what I mean? When you're fishing in your comfort zone, and you've probably been in that situation before, so when things go wrong, you kind of know how to get out of them. But man, like I said, if I can leave anything with the listeners is do you, and typically at the end of the day, you're going to be a lot better off.
All right, Bill. Well, thanks again for being on the show. As Aaron mentioned, always bringing the great information for Bass Edge listeners. Best of luck in the remainder of your Elite Series season, man. Bass Edge Nation, y'all stay right here. Aaron and I will highlight some interesting aspects in our closing remarks. We will be right back.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
The PowerPole Charge Marine Power Management Station is the most advanced system of its kind available on the market. It does the work of 3 devices, a traditional battery charger, a charge on the run, and an emergency start system, all in one compact unit. The Charge lets you run your boat's accessories the way you want to run them by allowing you to monitor and control your power usage through the PowerPole app. It automatically devotes power to the batteries that need it the most for maximum efficiency. The new Charge from PowerPole. Power where you need it, power how you need it, power when you need it.
Be at home with nature with nature-inspired art, decor, and gifts by Wild Wings at wildwings.com. Explore art prints and canvas wraps of bass, trout, walleye, muskie, and more by acclaimed artists like Mark Cicino.
I primarily paint underwater scenes of game fish, and usually in a fishing situation, going after prey or going after a lure or a fly. I get asked sometimes whether I like fishing better or artwork. It would be tough to give either of them up. I can't really think of a good reason to give either up, so I'm going to stick with them.
Make your home, office, or cabin show off your passion for angling. Visit wildwings.com/BassEdge and sign up for an exclusive offer to Bass Edge listeners of 10% off your next order. Give something special to your loved one and be at home with nature. Visit wildwings.com/BassEdge. That's wildwings.com/BassEdge to get 10% off your next order of nature-inspired art, decor, and gifts by Wild Wings.
Kurt, post-spawn on fishing, kind of as I alluded to, during the episode, I think it can be very intimidating, can be difficult at times, right? I mean, the fish aren't feeling well. They're just kind of hanging out, trying to regroup. But I thought Bill did a really good job of providing some useful information. Hopefully that's going to really kind of increase our odds at putting a fish in the boat.
Without a doubt. And the great information that was really outlying all of the tips and tactics he talked about was simplicity. Very simple. Didn't get it, crazy elaborate on, well, if they're doing this or if they're doing that. It's, hey, man, I'm looking for a shad spawn. I'm looking for a bluegill spawn, and I'm looking for somewhere they're hanging out in between those two activity levels, right? And based on, what I feel like is their seasonal behavior pattern, mood of feeling, just like you were talking about, just a little bit less activity and those types of things, and how he goes about targeting bass that are in those scenarios. So, man, I think he mentioned, you got to look for that shad spawn early in the day. It's going to happen fairly quick. You got about a 2-3 hour window max, and then he's going to move in those bluegill beds, looking for those as well, and then he's going to move into those kind of resting spots. And I love the fact offshore, we asked him, like, what are you doing offshore? and he's like, well, what's offshore? And I'm like, well, what's offshore to Bill Lowen? And all of a sudden offshore to Bill Lowen was just off the bank, right? I mean, it wasn't out there 100 yards, 50 yards on the end of a point.
Yeah, it's maybe where most people run their boat. That's offshore to him, as far as with the trolling motor, that moving away 20, 30 feet off of where he normally casts. It seems like that was his description of offshore.
110%. So again, just keeping everything super simple. And I really talked about that shad spawn issue, because you'll find that shad spawn, and sometimes there's no bass around it. Loved his breakdown of how, hey man, there's not a fish on every log. There's not a fish on every dock, and you got to find different areas of those that tactic or that technique that's going on to get into the bass. It's just part of that process. Overall, man, we're all better post-spawn angler right now.
Absolutely. And certainly we want to provide that time versus us continuing to talk about it. Let's get out there on the water and try and get it done. Want to thank everyone for tuning in to episode 351. Hard to believe. Next episode will be coming up May 15th. Exciting time. Be sure to stay on All Things Bass Edge via the social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, certainly BassEdge.com, where you can find all things Bass Edge, from apparel to Jay McNamara's books to Pure Clean to Lucas. All of that stuff can be found right there. But in the meantime, Kurt, best of luck in your coming week. And we look forward to really hooking up with everybody else, pardon the pun, but on episode 352, May 15th. So long, everybody.
The Edge is presented by Megaware KeelGuard. For more information on BassEdge or to shop at the BassEdge online store, visit BassEdge.com. And be sure to join Kurt Dove and Aaron Martin right here on another episode of The Edge. Brought to you in part by Nitro Boats, Lucas Oil, ProtectTheHarvest.com, Mercury Marine, PowerPole, and Rapaholic